morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Brooke Dilling. I am the Director of Cultural Affairs for Denver Arts and Venues. We appreciate you being here today for Denver Creates Digging into the Data. If you haven't already, there is a QR code on the first slide. We are encouraging you to scan that code and fill out our pre-event survey. And this helps us to know what information you're coming in with today and what information you might be leaving with at the end. I have a few additional housekeeping notes. If you are wishing to use closed caption, on the right-hand side of your screen, kind of more towards the middle right, you will see the CC or closed caption button. And you can click that to turn that on for you personally to be able to read along with the presenters. We're also joined by our friends in the City of Denver Sign Language Services Office who are providing ASL interpretation today. We want to thank them so much for being here. There's time for you to answer questions at the end. You can use the Q&A function in this town hall to submit your questions. We'll be answering some of them throughout and saving some of them for the end of the presentation. And you can also add comments to what other people have posted. Now, in order to get us moving along, I would like to welcome Tariana Navas-Nieves, our Executive Deputy Director for Denver Arts and Venues.
Thank you, Brooke. And I'm Tariana Navas-Nieves, like Brooke said, Deputy Executive Director for Denver Arts and Venues. And before we begin, we must acknowledge that the land on which we stand, live, and learn is the traditional territory of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho peoples. We also recognize the 48 contemporary tribal nations that are historically tied to the lands that make up the state of Colorado. With a history of exclusions and erasures, we intentionally honor the indigenous communities in our city and are grateful for their contributions. Let's not forget that this land was theirs long before we made it ours. So we launched Denver's cultural plan, Denver Creates, in May of this year. And today we will be learning about the data behind Denver Creates, a collective commitment to the arts. And I will walk us through today's agenda and what you can expect to learn. As a reminder, Denver Creates, which serves as the city's roadmap for a thriving arts and culture ecosystem, was grounded in research and is a reflection of the work and passion that many of you joining us today have put into building our city's vibrant and cultural landscape. So today, for today's program, we'll begin with an overview of Denver Creates, including the role that data play in cultural planning in the city, in particular, what is unique about the research methodology of Denver Creates. We will also share a brief summary of the 3 collective commitments that capture what was central to the data gathered from residents and our arts and culture sector. Some of you may already be familiar with the plan, but just in case, we're posting a link to the plan in the chat if you'd like to access it and download it now. Next, we will hear from Dr. Lynn Osgood, CEO of Civic Arts. Lynn was instrumental in the data collection leading up to Denver Creates. She will provide context on the first round of data collection and why gathering qualitative data was important for this updated cultural plan. After Lynn, we will hear from Kate Darwin and Catherine Rocky with Corona Insights. Kate and Catherine will talk about the second round of qualitative data collection and the statistically valid survey of residents. They will then dig into how all this data informed the development of the cultural plan. Denver Creates, a collective commitment to the arts. And then finally, we will hear from Alejandra Calvo with Platform. She will share how Platform is using Denver Creates to inform and guide their work. And that's important because we want Denver Creates to be a tool, a guide for the work that you all do and contribute to a thriving cultural sector. So with that, let's get started. And I will first frame the session. As I said, today is an extension of the original Denver Creates presentation from the launch that so many of you may have attended. It's a review, again, of the data sources, which are key to clarity and transparency on where the data came from and how it's captured in our three commitments. So we will show those connections and the thread between the data and the three commitments. And this is important again because this is a collective commitment. Denver creates a collective commitment. And as such, this ensures a shared understanding and sets a clear foundation for the work and engagement ahead. So let's move ahead to the next slide. And today is all about the data and the significant role it played in the cultural planning process. Data is powerful. Data allows us to accurately understand the strengths and opportunities within our communities and our arts and cultural sector. For example, the fact that 87% of Denver residents believe arts and culture create active, unique neighborhoods is a strength. Knowing that 45% believe that if you wanted to experience arts, culture, and creativity today, it would be easy to find it in your neighborhood is an opportunity for all of us to develop strategies to address this, especially when back in 2013, it was 57% compared to now 45%. 57% at the time of residents thought that it was easy to experience arts, culture, and creativity in our neighborhoods. Beyond analysis, also, data can also be profoundly inspiring. For example, learning that Denver is considered an arts town by 73% of residents is a compelling insight that energizes and guides future efforts. It also highlights the cultural sector's integral role in who we are as a city. In short, data moves us beyond assumptions to a place of informed action and shared vision. In 2014, as you can see in this timeline, we launched Imagine 2020, the city's first cultural plan in 25 years at the time. Since then, every 3 years, we've conducted a statistically valid survey for residents on their perceptions about arts, culture, and creativity. In other words, we captured this quantitative data in 2014, 2017, 2020, and 2024. Data collection was central to Denver Creates, which is the refresh of Imagine 2020. Yet the data collection was amplified with the addition of qualitative data. The survey focused on residents was quantitative data, and then we added qualitative data for Denver Creates and a unique approach to data gathering and the cultural planning process. Next. So what was unique? What was this unique approach to data gathering and cultural planning? And if we can move to the next slide. Well, in 2019, as we were approaching the end of the timeline of the cultural plan, we evaluated what the next stage of the cultural plan would be. And we realized that we did not need a new cultural plan. We did not need to start from nothing. We had what we considered a clear path ahead and a plan for a refresh of the cultural plan. Of course, the irony that is not lost on me that we did not imagine 2020. Early in 2020, we were ready to start the work with our consulting partners. We had envisioned amplifying our research methodology, as I said, with the addition of qualitative data from the arts and cultural sector. This would offer a more complete and comprehensive view of the arts and cultural landscape and its connection to our communities. Our first meeting was set for April of 2020. I'm just going to pause because we all remember April of 2020. That meeting was originally meant to be in person. Instead, we met virtually via a newly discovered app known as Zoom. That was a fateful meeting. We met around a virtual table, and as we were experiencing collectively a global pandemic and crisis of the arts and culture sector that we were about to engage with, we realized two key things. First, the plan we had no longer made sense. We could not be more out of touch if we were to go to our sector and talk about cultural planning. Frankly, who cared about cultural planning? We also knew that we needed to capture that moment in time. We needed to listen. We felt confident that understanding the hopes, aspirations, and challenges of the sector at that time would be important to get to the other side, not just to survive, but to rebuild and to thrive again. So we shifted the design of the data gathering, and we were lucky that we had the right consulting partner that was willing to scratch the original plan and dive into one that had not been designed yet alongside with us. We also made a bold decision. We wanted to step outside of the traditional cultural planning process, which meant that we made a commitment that the data that we gathered would become the plan. In other words, there would be no filter. It would not be a top down approach. We would take the data and share it. The data gathered in the voices of those who share their perspectives would be shared as we heard it, and that data would guide us. And then, since the data gathered in 2020 was from a time heightened crisis, we knew that we needed to re-engage residents in the cultural sector. This meant that we needed to wait before sharing the plan publicly. Capturing data in 2024 would provide the most accurate picture of where we are. Thousands of community voices were heard, more than 100 in-depth interviews were conducted, and looking back, I will not necessarily recommend culture planning during a pandemic, but I am proud of the work we have done and how we have done it. We did not let, as you maybe have heard, do not let a crisis go to waste. We sure did not. We seized the moment with a commitment to equity, to one another, to transparency, and to collaboration. Next, the rigor of the research methodology framed the guiding vision of Denver Creates to grow and strengthen Denver's arts and culture ecosystem for everyone to enjoy. Next, Denver Creates was built on a foundation of community and creative voices that value and care for arts and culture. The data that will be shared today determine the three shared commitments and actionable strategies to create a more equitable and dynamic cultural landscape. So to refresh your memory, these are the three collective commitments. Number one is about access. Number two is about cultivating the cultural community. And the third one is about supporting the economic vitality of the sector. Next. So the actionable strategies under each of the shared commitments meet at the intersection of what artists, cultural workers, creatives, and the diversity of Denver communities have set as priorities. From advancing equity in funding, next to promoting Denver art scene and supporting a next generation of creatives, to addressing the need for affordable spaces, these are all priorities that rose to the top on our research. So now it is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Lynn Osgood, CEO of Civic Arts, who is the partner that embarked on an unexpected journey that became that solid foundation of the work we are proud today. Lynn will share the important role qualitative data collection played in Denver Creates and helps us understand grounded theory. So take it away, Lynn, a partner in crime. And thank you for your
Indeed.
partnership during those very unique times. Thank you.
Thank you, Tariana. Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Lynn Osgood. I'm the CEO of a small nonprofit in Austin, Texas. We are urban planners, and as urban planners, we recognize the profound power of the arts to shape and form our communities in healthy ways, the ways we truly need as human beings to thrive. And so we work with organizations and cities across the U.S. to develop strategies that will help them grow and support their cultural sectors to do that good work. So as Tariana mentioned, we started work in Denver in a pandemic. And I remember it so vividly. Our first meeting, we were just a few weeks into the full shutdown, and we were just scratching our heads. And what I so appreciated at that moment was Tariana's leadership. She said from the beginning, here at Denver Arts and Venues, we work from a foundation of a strong set of values. We need to start with those values, to check in with everyone to see how they're doing, and importantly, to learn how it is that they're navigating in this completely otherworldly moment. So we decided that we needed to let conversations guide our process. And that set us down the path of working not from a quantitative approach, a numbers approach, but a qualitative approach, one that's based on inquiry, on questions, on conversations. Next slide. Let's go to the next one. So working in a purely qualitative way is not how cultural planning processes are typically done. Traditionally, we go in with research for planning processes through very structured means. It's surveys, it's carefully structured interviews, focus groups, and these are all good and deeply needed processes. But COVID was different. And it called for something deeper, something different that could help us meet the moment in where it truly was. And we knew where Denver Arts and Venues was starting from their core values, but we had to test those. Did those values still work in this new world we were experiencing? And we also knew that we couldn't start planning for the future, but we could lean into really understanding how it was that Denver creatives were responding to the moment. How did the inherent strengths of Denver's creative sector set down a path for where the city would go in the future? How could Denver Arts and Venues meet them there on the path that the creative sector was already setting down? It was a moment of diving deep into understanding the darkness of all the needs of the moment. But it was also a moment of understanding where the light and the hope would come for the future, when we would all be building our way out of that time. So next slide. So before I dive into what we did, I do want to give just a quick brief overview of what it means to work with qualitative and quantitative data. Just a quick side-by-side comparison. I'm not going to read the chart, but in general, as a researcher, you use these two types of data to purposefully get at two different types of information. Qualitative data lets you get at meaning making, at experience, at personal perceptions. It's how we narrate our lives. Quantitative analysis helps you see the patterns, the trends, the scales of information. So in essence, qualitative data gathering helps you to have conversations and work with observations, the observations that people are having about their lives. Quantitative data gathering, you need more targeted surveys. You need things that will help you get at the numbers that can help you make very strategic decisions. When you use them side by side, they serve to support and validate or sometimes challenge. And to really get at some of the most important issues we face, like equity, it requires both lenses. So quantitative data grounds plans in the reality of the here and now, but qualitative data sparks imagination, empathy, and innovation. And in the end, you need both. Next slide. So there were a couple things we did to start the project going. First, we adopted a grounded theory framework. That framework is really the opposite of traditional research. So in traditional research, you start with an idea that you're testing. Does sunlight really make plants grow? You can test it. You can put a plant under a bucket and find out. But using grounded theory approach, you start by saying, I know nothing, but I'll understand what I need to learn by starting down the path. And a key part of that journey for us was bringing on Denver's own poet laureate, Bobby Lefebvre. I wasn't in Denver. I'm not from Denver's creative community. I'm in fact the wrong person to do the interviews. We knew we needed to find someone from the Denver creative community that could serve as a trusted thought partner and to have real, open, and honest conversations with folks. Because we needed to understand how people were meeting the moment in a very unfiltered way. Bobby was amazing. We did 3 rounds of interviews with diverse groups of interviewees. And with each round, we would take the conversations, we would find the themes, the connections, the insights, and we would code them. And this was all pre-AI, so this was a lot of line-by-line work. And from each round, we would form new questions for the next round. What were the things we needed to understand more deeply? And what we learned is that the core values people in Denver's cultural community held before the pandemic were ringing loudly in the midst of the pandemic. It is exactly what they brought along with them. Commitments to diversity, equity, and inclusion, the value of knowing the value of connecting with community, preserving community, sustaining the community, and the role that arts has to play at the forefront of those efforts. This was exactly how artists were meeting the moment that we were in. So when the pandemic ended, Denver Arts and Venues knew it was on solid ground to launch its next phase of development with Corona Insights. And as things progressed, we were thrilled to learn that, you can go to the next slide, that what we learned from the creative community in our first round of research connected exactly with the next phase of data gathering that Corona Insights was doing. So to tell you more about that, and to dive into some of the key findings, it is my pleasure to introduce Kate Darwin, Principal and Owner at Corona Insights, and Catherine Rocky, Senior Associate at Corona Insights. Kate and Catherine will dive into both the qualitative and quantitative data and share how this information informed the creation of Denver Creates. Thanks for joining us today, Kate and Catherine.
Thank you. I'm just going to try, Brooke, and see if I can take control. No. All right. Well, it was a valiant attempt. We've been having fun technology games this morning. Well, good morning, everyone. As Lynn so graciously introduced us, I'm Kate Darwin, a principal at Corona Insights, and I'm here with my wonderful colleague, Catherine Rocky, a senior associate. And we are so excited to share with you the data today. Before we jump into the actual findings, as you heard at the beginning, we had collected data during the height of the pandemic. And it was super useful at the time to understand what the experience of residents was, how the cultural sector was handling things and how we could best support them. But as Tariana noted, you know, some of the things that happened during the pandemic, we didn't know if those were maybe a one-time issue, if those were things that had a lingering impact, if they were changes that maybe had just accelerated a trend that already existed. So it was really important to be able to repeat the research to confirm whether the initial concepts and ideas for the cultural plan still resonated and still felt like the right path forward. So if you go 2 slides ahead, sorry. Just briefly, I did want to talk about the methodology. If you are a data person, it is super exciting to have longitudinal data. So this survey we have now done for over a decade, which is so exciting. We can really explore how things have or have not changed over the years. So in this iteration of the survey, we did a mail survey. So we sent paper surveys to 10,000 households in Denver. I'll note that I won't detail our sampling today, but we did try to create a sampling plan that would encourage larger samples of Black and Latino residents, so we would be able to explore their experiences in our data. The survey could be completed on paper, or there was the option to go online using a QR code or a link. It was available in English and Spanish. The survey instrument has stayed fairly consistent over the 4 waves. So many of the questions have been repeated, and you'll get to see those trends today. I will note that in 2020, just given what was going on, we made a few bigger changes and added some questions. Also, some we didn't ask. We didn't bother asking about barriers to participation in 2020. It kind of seemed self-evident what was happening. So in 2024, we had 730 usable surveys. The data were weighted to be representative of Denver's population. Those surveys also included 88 completed surveys from Black residents and 176 from Latino residents. As Lynn noted, qualitative research was added in 2021 and then was repeated in 2024. Much like the survey, we kept it very consistent in how it was done. So it was Tariana and Bobby handling the interviews. We were very intentional with our sampling, trying to include a mix of interviewees that represented different art disciplines, different roles, different identities, different parts of the city. And again, the interview questions themselves were fairly consistent in 2021 and 2024. We did have additional probes in 2024, kind of testing some of the key concepts of the cultural plan. And as you heard already, we had over 100 interviews as part of that. Okay, so if you go to the next slide, we're going to jump into the findings. So just to orient you to the slides that I'm going to show you today. At the bottom here on the bottom right, that's the actual survey question that was asked. On the left, this is the link to the specific commitment and strategy in the cultural plan. If you visited the website that was sent around earlier, if you go to the plan, you'll see the research folded in as well. So don't feel like you have to be writing all of that down. Also, I believe the slides from today will be available after today's presentation. Okay, let's jump in. So one of the big components of the survey is trying to understand how Denver residents feel about arts, culture, and creativity in the city. So we have a number of questions where we're asking for their agreement with different statements about the impact that arts, culture, and creativity have on Denver. So here are two of those items. So this is showing you the percentage of residents who agree with the statement on the left here. Arts, culture, and creativity in Denver bring communities together. And on the right, arts, culture, and creativity in Denver support and create active and unique neighborhoods. And what you can see for both of these items is that there was a slight dip in 2020. So obviously with everything going on, it was maybe a little bit less obvious that arts, culture, and creativity was bringing communities together, or that it was supporting and creating active and unique neighborhoods when your neighborhood was just quiet. But as you can see, these have recovered in 2024. So these are really high. The vast majority of residents feel very strongly about these impacts. Go to the next slide. So we also asked some questions that are more about external perceptions of Denver as well. So here we have, again, graphs showing you how much residents agree with the following statements. Arts, culture, and creativity in Denver contribute to Denver's economy. That's the graph on the left. In the middle, arts, culture, and creativity in Denver improve Denver's national reputation. And then on the right, arts, culture, and creativity attract tourism. What you can see is that for contribute to Denver's economy, that's been pretty consistent over the years. And then on the right, for attracting tourism, this is always comforting when you collect data to see that your data confirms what you know from other data. So obviously there's been a resurgence in travel and tourism post 2020, and we see that in our data as well, that people, there was a dip in whether people believed arts, culture, and creativity was attracting tourists in 2020, but we've recovered in 2024. This middle, oh, sorry, you go back. Yep. Yes, thank you. So in the middle here, This is agreement with the statement that arts, culture, and creativity improved Denver's national reputation. And what you can see is that this has decreased in 2020, and it still hasn't recovered in 2024. We'll talk about this in a minute. Again, I just want to highlight these are still really high percentages, but it's still interesting to look into the pattern. So we'll explore that point a little bit more on the next slide. So one of the first questions we ask in the survey is whether people think Denver is an outdoorsy town, a sports town, an arts town, a cow town. And at the top here, you see that the belief that Denver is an outdoorsy town and a sports town has been consistent over the past few years. At the bottom, that bottom line, belief that Denver is a cow town, thankfully, has been consistently low. But that orange line in the middle shows that there's been a drop in whether people believe that Denver is an arts town. And again, it is still a high, the majority of residents believe that Denver is an arts town, but it's just interesting that as some pieces of the cultural sector have recovered, the sense of whether Denver is an arts town is still lagging. So if you go to the next slide, we'll dig deeper into this question. There were some interesting differences by segments of the population. So this graph is showing you 2024 data only and is showing you the percentage of people who said that Denver is an arts town. On the far left, that's that same 73% overall. But now we've broken it down by a couple of different categories. So in this first section on the left, we've broken it down by people's ratings of arts, culture, and creativity in their neighborhood. And what you'll notice, and perhaps not surprising, is that if you rate the amount of arts, culture, and creativity in your neighborhood as excellent or good, you are far more likely to feel like Denver is an arts town compared to if you only rate it as fair or poor. So some of this sense of whether Denver is an arts town is, based on your immediate experience in your neighborhood. We also saw slight differences by race and ethnicity. Latino and Black residents were more likely to believe that Denver is an arts town, slightly more likely. And we also saw some differences by educational attainment. If you go to the next slide, some of the other impacts that we explored in the survey, we asked people whether they believe that arts, culture, and creativity provide opportunities for people of all ages to learn. That's on the left. Again, you see a slight dip in 2020. Education was having a rough year that year, and that's recovered somewhat in 2024. On the right here, this is whether people believe that arts, culture, and creativity in Denver represent our diverse communities, and that's remained pretty consistent over the years. You go to the next slide. So in 2020, we did add a few items to explore the impact further. So here we've asked people, do you agree with the statement, arts, culture, and creativity help our communities heal during a crisis, on the left? And the vast majority of residents believe that arts, culture, and creativity can help their community heal during a crisis. This has dropped in 2024. Like all data, this data can't give us all of the answers, but some hypotheses for why this might happen would be, as the pandemic has become less of an immediate crisis that's constantly on the news, maybe just the sense of what is a crisis has changed, and so ratings have changed somewhat. On the right here, we asked people whether they agree that arts, culture, and creativity help address issues of racial injustice, and that's remained consistent from 2020 to 2024. Roughly 2/3 of residents agree with that. Okay. Additionally, we asked a lot of questions about the impact on Denver itself by arts, culture, and creativity, but we also wanted to understand the personal impact on residents. So we added items in 2020. This is a very similar question, so it's how much do you agree or disagree that arts, culture, and creativity improves your mental health? That's on the far left. In the middle, those two bars connects you with others. And then on the right, whether arts, culture, and creativity helps you express yourself. And overall, I mean, these are, again, huge majorities of people who feel that arts, culture, and creativity have these positive impacts on them personally. Next slide, please. So going back to the impact on Denver overall, we asked whether arts, culture, and creativity in Denver increase quality of life and livability on the left here, and then on the right, whether it causes positive changes in our society. These, again, a small dip in 2020 and potentially recovering, but these differences are not statistically different yet. So we'll keep an eye on that moving forward. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm now going to talk a little bit about barriers and access, which has been a huge focus of this research. So I noted we didn't ask this question in 2020. This is just 2024 data. In this question, we asked people, do any of the following issues prevent you from attending arts, cultural, and creative events more frequently? Time and money are consistent barriers, and they have been. What's interesting in 2024 is lack of information, which is that third bar. That has increased since 2021. It is not unique to this project. We see this across a number of different topics where the splintering of media is just making people feel like it's harder to find information about what's going on, especially younger generations. So people younger than 35 were the most likely to say that that was a barrier. We go to the next slide. This was a kind of core metric to this survey. So here we're trying to understand what is the unmet need among residents for more arts, culture, and creativity. So in this question, we asked people, which of the following statements best describe how you feel about your participation with the arts, culture, and creative community in Denver? And this is showing you the percentage of people who chose, I do not participate as much as I would like. So in 2013, this was at 60%. I remember in 2017, we were so excited because this was starting to go down, which is the direction that you want it to go, that we're meeting the needs of residents. But then, you know, no one anticipated 2020, and so it started to trend back upwards. I'll note that most of this increase is among Latino residents and all other residents. Black residents have consistently reported a very high percentage saying that they do not participate as much as they would like. To understand a little bit deeper some of the barriers. So there's obviously a hunger for more experiences of arts, culture, and creativity. So at the top here, we asked if you wanted to learn more about an arts, cultural, or creative topic, it would be easy to do so, true or false. And this is showing you the percentage of residents saying that that statement is true. That has been consistently high. So people generally feel like they can learn about arts, cultural, and creative topics. Echoing that prior slide that showed that lack of information is a barrier. This middle line shows you the percentage of residents who report being satisfied with the amount of information that they get about arts, cultural, and creative events in Denver. That has shown a 20 percentage point drop since 2013. Again, not unique to this topic. We see it across topics, but still something that impacts access. And then finally, at the bottom here, this is the percentage of people saying that they feel like they don't have enough background information to enjoy or understand arts and cultural events. That has been creeping up, so that increased in 2020 and has remained consistent in 2024. Again, this is probably related to how people get information about arts, culture, and creativity in Denver. So if you go to the next slide, please. We asked people to rate the amount of arts, culture, and creativity in Denver and in their neighborhood. This has been interesting in the past. Basically, you see that people rate their the amount of arts, culture, and creativity in their neighborhood as worse than Denver itself. But this also shows that the recovery post-2020 has been different. So this top blue line here is showing you the percentage of residents who rate the amount of arts, culture, and creativity in Denver as good or excellent. You can see there was a huge drop in 2020, but there's also been a significant recovery in 2024. At the bottom here, this orange line, that's showing you the amount of arts, ratings of the amount of arts, culture, and creativity in your neighborhood currently. And what you see is that's actually decreased from 2020 to 2024. I'm not going to show this data today, but definitely in the survey across some other questions, you get the sense that while kind of larger arts, cultural and creative entities were able to survive some of the impact of the pandemic, some of the kind of local organic arts, culture, and creativity that just grew in your neighborhood may not have fared as well throughout this. And then in the middle there, that's a line, people's ratings of the amount of culturally diverse programs in Denver. While that did show a dip, it seems to be recovering in 2024. So if you go to the next slide. Oh, sorry. So we asked people if they wanted to experience arts, culture, and creativity today, would it be easy to find in the city of Denver? So that's the top line of people. This is showing you the percentage of people who say true. This is extremely high. We like to joke in surveys, you almost never get 100%. This is probably as close as you get to 100%. However, that green line, the second line, sorry, Brooke, did you want me to pull the presentation back on the screen?
Hang on a second, Kate. I don't know what just happened. 1 second. Sorry for the technical difficulties, everyone.
Thank you. Can you actually go back one slide? Thank you. Okay. It was a cliffhanger. So that middle line, the green line, is showing you the percentage of residents who said if they wanted to experience arts, culture, and creativity today, it would be easy to find in their neighborhood. Again, this echoes what we've seen across other survey questions where people are just reporting it's more challenging today or in 2024 to find arts, culture, and creativity in their neighborhood. And then this last line is the percentage of residents reporting experiencing something artistic, cultural, or creative today that has remained consistent over time. Okay, next slide. So finally, one other data point related to access is whether Denver residents feel included in arts, culture, and creativity in Denver. So do they feel that people like themselves participate in arts, culture, and creativity? And do they feel like people like them work in arts, culture, and creativity in Denver? So on the left here, this is the percentage of people who agree with the statement, people like me participate in arts, culture, and creativity in Denver. This has decreased since 2017. It decreased in 2020 and it hasn't recovered yet in 2024. Again, these are still pretty high percentages. We're talking about 3/4 of residents saying that people like them do participate. In 2024, we added whether people feel like people like them work in arts, cultural, and creative jobs in Denver, and 50% of residents reported agreeing with that statement. Before I hand this over to Catherine, this was a lot of survey data, so I just wanted to kind of give big picture summary is that Denver residents overwhelmingly believe that arts, culture, and creativity have an impact, a positive impact on the city itself, but also on them personally. There has been an interesting dip in the identity of Denver as an arts town, which may reflect some of the variability in what the post-pandemic recovery has looked like. So my final summary point would be, as you've seen across these last few slides, it seems like recovery in neighborhoods has maybe been slower than some recovery in other parts of the city. So with that, I'm going to hand this over to Catherine to walk through the interview results.
Awesome. Thank you, Kate. So I will kind of pull in the interview findings here, which add a lot of depth to the data, as Lynn explained, just giving a different perspective also, since the survey has been of residents all these years. Just a reminder about the interview methodology conducted with over 100 people working in the arts and cultural sector. So the slides I'm about to share are the combined findings from 2021 and 2024 iterations. We really wanted to come back to the sector in 2024 to see what was aligning, what was still resonating, and most everything did resonate between the two iterations. So we'll share those findings here. Next slide. To get started with our first key finding, a really important bit of information we found from this research was the beliefs about the economic impact of arts and culture. So we found in conversation with the sector that artists and cultural workers strongly believe that funding arts and culture is foundational to a thriving, economically vibrant city, rather than just an inessential luxury. Illustrating these beliefs, we have an interviewee from the sector sharing on the right here. It comes down to prioritizing arts development alongside other priorities such as healthcare, education, or just being mindful of that, being integrated into all these sorts of larger issues or things that might be considered essential for a happy, fulfilled life or a thriving community. making sure that the arts is always an integral part of that and always a key collaborator, and in fact, a resource that people turn to really get to the level of being a thriving community and not just a surviving community. So echoing these sentiments, I'll just pull back in some of the survey data that Kate just shared. In 2024, the vast majority of Denver residents believed that arts, culture, and creativity attract tourism and support and create active and unique neighborhoods. And these statistics have increased since 2020 and rebounded to 2017 levels. As further evidence of this, the CBCA 2023 report showed that the economic impact of cultural tourism had increased 15% from 2019 to 2022, and that is for visitors who reside outside of the Metro Denver region. And then the 2025 report, which was just recently released a couple weeks ago, shows that this upward trend continues, perhaps not as sharply, with a 4.5% increase between 2022 and 2024. Move on to the next slide. So despite both qualitative and quantitative data supporting the economic impact of arts and culture in Colorado, Colorado ranks 46 out of 50 states when it comes to per capita spending on arts and culture. And it also has one of the lowest amount of states' art agency fundings among the Western states. So federal funding during the pandemic was an amazing lifeline for the arts in Denver. However, more sustainable funding is needed now that these one-time federal funds have been distributed. And conversations with the sector also highlight barriers to affordability, equitable access, and sustainable funding, especially for historically marginalized groups. In these conversations, artists noted how new and unknown artists, and more often BIPOC artists, tends to have greater difficulties breaking into the funding world, where there's a perception that grants will typically go first to a known or safe artist that's already well connected to nonprofits. So to make funding opportunities more accessible, artists just need clearer processes. Arts and culture workers cited limited awareness of available funding opportunity, which can hinder access, especially for early career artists. Interviewees also discussed the need for more community resources to raise awareness of pools of funding and opportunities for professional development or training about funding or grant writing. Some also suggested expanding or enhancing grant-making practices to better support artists, such as making available multi-year funding for artists to have greater stability and ability to both live and work in the city of Denver. Bringing me to our next finding about access and affordability for Denver artists on the next slide. Interviewed artists and cultural workers felt that they were still far from thriving, naming the affordability and housing crisis that has grown since 2020 as a prime barrier. Many artists felt that both living in and working in Denver has become prohibitively expensive and voiced a need to see how city, county, and local agencies would help combat the inflation that has driven out so many talented artists. Those who must live outside the city noted they can no longer access funding for local artists, even though their work is in the city. These affordability concerns are illustrated in the first quote on the right. My concern is about the many brilliant artists we are hemorrhaging. I have this deep concern about the grassroots level of artists who aren't going to be here by the time they become professional. How do we identify them and support them? These conversations also revealed concerns about gentrification and displacement in many parts of Denver for both artists and the wider community, which impacts the affordability of art spaces that artists can produce and share their work in. Digging into this idea deeper into the next slide about access to art spaces. We get the next slide, please. So artists and cultural workers emphasize that shared art spaces are essential for fostering community connections, where residents can engage with one another, build stronger relationships, and engage with the arts and artists in their neighborhoods. Besides reducing the cost of renting spaces as a way to address the access issue, arts and culture workers also discussed innovative solutions, like making better use of vacant venues or spaces around the city and investing in more artist and residence type programs. Okay, next slide. Finally, something that came up a lot in conversations with the arts sector was the importance of cross-sector collaboration. Artists and cultural workers stress the importance of interdependence and collaboration in fostering meaningful long-term change across sectors. The arts sector underscored beliefs that having arts at the table in cross-sector and civic conversations not only ensures creative problem solving, but also brings a diversity of opinions and perspectives, which can ultimately lead to more equitable solutions. The arts and cultural community can help address social and civic issues by bringing this creative thinking and different solutions to the table that may otherwise be absent from such discussions. Artists and creatives interviewed shared that their perspectives and skill in communicating with diverse audiences, conceptualizing new possibilities, and providing connection in times of crisis can serve in government processes. Illustrating this, we see Mayor Mike Johnson in the top quote, share. When we thought about our plan for public safety or economic revival in downtown, every one of those involves art. In every one of those conversations, we want people to instinctively say, what is the role of art in this solution? How do you maximize joy in this space as opposed to how do you reduce negativity? We'd much prefer a focus on the former than on the latter. And pulling some survey data back in, residents also believe that this long-term change is possible for the arts to impact, as most residents in 2024 agreed that arts, culture, and creativity help raise awareness and attention to social issues. And many also believed that arts, culture, and creativity can help a community heal during crisis and help address issues of racial injustice. Next slide. Lastly, wanting to honor some of the challenges of cross-sector collaboration that was noted in the interviews, some interviewees relayed that artists and creatives are not always fully valued when their presence on a project is seen as a nice but unnecessary add-on. That they need to be and should be viewed as full partners in order to arrive at desired outcomes. From sitting on city boards and commissions to taking on roles in nonprofits and government agencies, artists and creatives seek to be present at many different tables, including those designated for advocacy and advancing public policy on arts, culture, and creativity, as well as other domains, which the first quote on the right emphasizes, arts must be at the table when civic conversations are happening. This is essential for demonstrating that the arts are one of the many tools we have at our disposal for addressing and solving citywide problems. Based on feedback from those in the arts and cultural sector, having a seat at the table for various government and civic processes is highly valued with certain caveats. Artists and cultural workers interviewed felt that being at the table was crucial, but required greater investments in access, especially for younger or newer artists. This includes making sure they are invited and given equal opportunities to be heard. And moreover, those interviewed wanted to see greater efforts to connect new or younger artists with mentorship to help them navigate both funding and politics so that once at the table, they have a greater chance to contribute effectively, which the bottom quote exemplifies well this idea of building up that pipeline. For me, it's about building the pipeline of leadership, starting really young and not losing sight of that. We need to be looking and thinking and talking to younger people and really letting their voice be heard and having them as equal partners. Finally, several interviewees also noted that burnout was a reality for many working in this sector who are already spread thin. And some artists and cultural workers are just not as concerned with trying to become full board or committee members per se, but would still like space to be able to bring forward the needs of their arts and cultural community or practice to inform larger funding or policy initiatives. With that, I will pass it back to Kate to kind of give a high-level summary of everything we talked about.
Thank you, Catherine. Okay, so you can go ahead to the next slide. Because we've presented quite a bit of data, and it's from, you know, two different modes, looking at different types of audiences, whether it's a more general resident survey or kind of these in-depth interviews with the cultural sector. I thought it might be helpful just to, if we had to tie it all together, what are the three big takeaways from the research? And so that's what I've laid out here. So number one, access remains such a big issue, and both sides of the coin. So residents still feel, you know, barriers and challenges. They have a huge hunger for more arts, cultural, and creative experiences. And so figuring out how to increase that access is really important. As Catherine just noted, access from the cultural sector as well. So how to access funding, spaces, etc., also came up. So access was probably one of our number one findings from the research. The second point is that, as I said earlier, Denver residents strongly, I can't emphasize this enough, these percentages are really high, strongly believe in the positive impact that arts, culture, and creativity have on Denver. And as you just saw on the previous slides, the cultural sector is eager for more support that will allow them to collaborate, both with each other, but also with the city. As Catherine noted, there's really this desire to be at the table and to help with problems in the city. And then finally, the cultural sector is a critical part of Denver's economy. CBCA just released their economic impact data, and you know, it shows a huge impact for the city. When we were gathering the data to inform the prior cultural plan, we noted that affordability was, you know, coming up a little bit. The past few years with the pandemic and inflation have only accelerated issues of affordability. And so those really need to be addressed in order to maintain the economic vitality of the sector. So if you go to the next slide. Oh, okay. Well, with that, I'm going to hand this over to Alejandra.
So before we thank you, before we hand it to Alejandra, I just wanted to thank you, Lynn, Kate, and Catherine, for helping us understand how all of this data informed Denver's updated cultural plan. Denver creates a collective commitment to the arts. And I want to take a moment because the collective part, a collective commitment to the arts, that is hugely important. Denver creates, captures, and shares the data. Now, it is a collective commitment. It's a collective work that is necessary for all of us to then address, right, the needs, the hopes, the aspirations of the sector and our residents. So we want Denver Creates to be a tool for our creatives. And data, as we know, is only relevant and useful if we use it. So with that, if we use it as a guide to make budgetary decisions, if we use it as a guide to establish community engagement and programming and plan programming, so data can also serve as a lens to evaluate the work that we do. So for example, we at Arts and Venues ask the question of every one of our programs, does it support Denver Creates? In other words, does the program need it is a program needed and wanted by our residents and the cultural community, as reflected in Denver Creates commitments and actionable strategies. And we hope that Denver Creates and the data that is captured can serve as a tool. So as such, we want to hear from one of our strongest organizations in the city platform on how they are putting this plan to work for them. So with that, Alejandra.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you all for having me here today. My name is Alejandra. I'm the program director at Platform, and I'm excited to share a little bit about Platform and how we're using data to strengthen, inform, and advocate for the work we do with artists and young people. For over 20 years, Platform's mission has been to serve youth, especially those with limited access to the arts, as well as professional and emerging artists. Since we first learned about Denver Creates framework and the data they collected to better understand the needs of the community, we have used their 3 commitments to reflect how our mission aligns with the city's vision of broadening access, cultivating cultural community, and supporting the economic vitality of our creative sector. Next. At Platform, we are focusing on broadening access to under-resourced youth by offering a year-round paid internship for high school students. Art Lab was designed specifically for teens who often face barriers to arts education or who don't have access to creative opportunities elsewhere. Through Art Lab, our youth receive art-based learning, mentorship with working artists, exposure to art careers, professional practices, cultural and outdoor excursions, academic support, mental wellness resources, access to a food pantry, and most importantly, a safe place to belong. Next. We gather data at multiple points during the internship. And after completing the program. One of the most valuable tools is the Youth Outcome Toolkit survey developed by Corona Insights. This comprehensive self-evaluation measures 7 key areas of positive youth development, and it is used by organizations across Denver through the Alliance for Creative Youth Development. Some of the data that we were able to collect, we have learned that 100% of our youth reported feeling safe, supported, and valued at Art Lab. Every single participant said that they found a place where they truly belong, and 75% of the youth learned a wellness skill and applied it into their lives. Next. Denver Creates also calls us to cultivate cultural community, and that's central to our work. Each year, our youth cohort brings rich diversity and identity and perspectives. To ensure we're reaching the communities most in need, we also have collected self-reported demographic data. 77% of participants are BIPOC, 75 are low income, 68 identified as LGBTQIA+, and 37 disclosed a disability or being neurodivergent. Next. We create space for youth to share their stories through art. They get to learn from resident artists who share similar cultural or lived experiences, and this makes our work much more meaningful. Our youth and artists have opportunities to make socially engaged art that directly speaks to their personal experiences and their communities. Next. And finally, we align with Denver Creates' 3rd commitment by supporting economic vitality. Our Artist in Residency program fully supports residencies for adult artists to develop new, culturally relevant work while engaging directly in the Denver community. Artists receive working stipends, planning stipends, a studio and gallery space, production support through a studio assistant, and free marketing materials. Our youth interns, 75% of whom come from low-income households, are also paid for their creative labor and time. both artists and young people have the opportunity to sell work at exhibitions, building early economic and networking opportunities. In the last 2 years, every single artist that we worked with has reported that the residency was meaningful and successful for their career. That tells us that investing in artists economically and creatively is essential for their success. We're grateful that our programs have received support through the Denver Creates Fund, and Denver Creates commitments really has served as a roadmap and affirms what our organization has learned over the years. When we invest in access, culture, and are able to provide economic opportunity, we are able to create an environment where everyone can see themselves, participate, and belong. I want to leave you with 2 quotes from a former intern and resident artist that really helps illustrate the impact of our work. Ryan, an Art Lab alumni, shared, "Art Lab was a safe haven for me, a space I could always come back to once a week and spend time making things I was passionate about. I learned to be more social in a safe space with people who shared my interest." And a previous resident artist reflected, "Platform was one of the best artistic experiences I've had in Denver. The support from staff and interns was restorative. This organization is truly doing the work, supporting artists and nurturing a new generation of powerful young artists and activists." Understanding all this data, feedback, and powerful personal stories truly helps us stay grounded in our mission, inform our progress, and helps us show the value and impact of the work we do. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. We are going to stop our slideshow right now, and we're going to bring all of our presenters back to the screen. And this is an opportunity for us to dig into some questions that you all might have. We are monitoring the Q&A. This is a great opportunity to put some of your questions in the chat right here. There is one question that was put in the chat earlier, and this might be one to, I'm tossing to Tariana, no pressure, but deaf arts today are still not fully integrated into the larger culture, and there is an ongoing segregation in this area. As you can see with some of the struggles we are having with our ASL interpretation, particularly in the Teams environment where it's really, the ASL interpretation has been really small on the screen today and limited ability to shift that. The question here is, what solutions can help change the fact that deaf arts is not fully integrated into the larger culture, and where can we turn to expand opportunities for deaf artists?
That is an excellent question. And what I would say is that accessibility, creating inclusive spaces for us is a priority. And we are in constant learning. So for us, partnership are key. We partner with organizations that bring the expertise in serving and engaging and elevating artists with disabilities, including deaf and artists of hard of hearing, including such as Access Gallery, Family. We also work closely with the Office of Disability Rights with the city. So what I would say is, and we also have presence of disability artists and disability representatives in not only our Denver Commission on Cultural Affairs, but we are intentionally looking at bringing artists and residents that have disabilities, including artists and community representatives that are deaf and hard of hearing, to our selection panels, to our decision-making tables. So what I would say is the work is ongoing. I would invite any community representative that identifies as a person with a disability to connect with us. I'm not just professionally, but in my personal life, I am the mother of two young people with disabilities, so I'm an advocate also in my personal life. So, and that engagement and that connection is critical. So I would say we are continuously learning. We are bringing goals directly into our work. It's something that we're not passively, we're not just listening, we are actively listening and then strategizing. But we can always do better. So I would certainly invite the connection because we want to continue to bring those voices to decision-making tables and more. So that's how I would answer that question. And I really appreciate elevating the disability community as key and integral to our work.
We have more questions coming in. This one I'm going to offer up to both Tariana and our Corona Insights team because they have done a lot of research here in the cultural community in Denver. And the question is, thank you for mentioning that Colorado is one of the lowest funded states for the arts. What role does this plan play in shifting that major challenge to the sector? So what are we hearing and what are we seeing from other research, and how does that play into anything in terms of how we address the low funding that we see compared to other states?
So I'll start, and then I think our friends at Corona can bring the data perspective. But we, as the Arts and Cultural Agency for the City and County of Denver, one of our key roles is leadership and advocacy. And there are a myriad of ways in which we do that. We are a partner to the state, Colorado Creative Industries. They actually are the lead organization that works on state advocacy. And part of that work is at a legislative level to make the case for additional funding. As a for instance, is also they are, as a state art agency, they also are the partners with the National Endowment for the Arts. And they are then they take that funding and distribute it in community. So I would say, as the Arts and Culture Agency stewarding Denver Creates can be a tool. As I said, it can be a tool for organizations, but it can be an advocacy tool. So what I would hope is that Denver Creates and the data, the rigorous and data that we have captured that actually elevate the key role that arts and culture play in a thriving and healthy community, that it is used as an advocacy tool, not just for, at a state level in terms of that direct funding to our state art agency, but just actually as a tool for federal support, for philanthropic support in general, right? The philanthropic sector is broader than the state art agency or their local art agency. It includes private foundations, it includes individual contributors. So I really hope and I believe that Denver Creates can be an advocacy tool that then is used to support the state as well as the city and county of Denver cultural sector. Kate and Catherine or Lynn, anything to add?
I'll just add, this is kind of like a very researchy angle on it, but if you're trying to find some of the silver linings of the pandemic, it's interesting that it was a naturally occurring experiment. And so we got to see the impact of some things. One of the things we got to see is a huge influx of federal funding and other funding into not just the arts and cultural sector, but other sectors as well. And so I think it's been interesting to see how that played out. What was it? What was the experience of that like? And to Tariana's point, what do you want to what do you want to advocate for, having maybe experienced that in just a small sense. So that's probably the main data angle that I would add. I don't know, Catherine, if you heard a little bit about this in some of the interviews as well.
I think in the interviews we had, kind of individual artists and cultural workers, and then we had a lot of cultural leaders. That statistic about being 46 out of 50 in funding, came from an article that one of the interviewees had written, Kristen Crampton Day. So they really had a broad and leadership focused perspective. The fact that the interviews that we did were so diverse, from just individual artists to real arts and cultural leaders in the state, gave a really broad and diverse perspective that was really helpful, and why we feel that the data that we can get from qualitative, also corroborating with CBCA and other secondary data, just all meshes together with, the economic impact of residents really believing in that impact, seeing the arts culture be on board, and seeing secondary data. Sorry, my cat is joining the call. Seeing the secondary data, really just all of it aligning. So we tried to bring that in a little bit, and you'll see that in the report on the website as well. There's bullet points from qualitative, quantitative, and other data sources that really speak to this.
Thank you. There's another question in the chat. We have a attendee that is curious about how Arts and Venues is working with neighboring counties and cities to collaborate and lift up these findings and create opportunities outside of the city and county of Denver.
I'll jump in and say that we'll underscore the collective, right? Denver creates a collective commitment to the arts, and we cannot do that in isolation. And as such, even though as the Arts and Culture Agency for the City and County of Denver, our work is focused on City and County of Denver residents. The reality is that we have many partners outside of the City and County of Denver that actually serve and perform in Denver, for instance. We also partner closely with, as I said, with Colorado Creative Industries, the state art agency, and Colorado Business Committee for the Arts, CBCA, also is a state membership organization that is not only leading in advocacy, but that brings the business community into the sector. I will also highlight the fact that one of our key funders in Denver, but also in 7 counties, is SCFD, the Scientific and Cultural Facilities District. So that in itself, right, presents not only opportunities, but connects us in a very natural way to other counties, especially those 7 counties. So I would say that it is that those connections are present not only in our partnerships in terms of the role that we play as leaders and advocates for the arts and cultural sector, but they also play a role in our program as well, and in our collective funding mechanism. I'll just say one more thing as an example, is obviously we share this data broadly, but we recognize that the collective is important. So we actually have collective funding programs in which a number of different funders come together alongside us to support statewide, right? So we have the Colorado Health Foundation, for instance, we have the state, we have, again, other philanthropic entities outside of Denver that come together. We are one of the funders, but then our goal is to support and elevate the sector as a whole and residents as a whole statewide, even though that, based on our role, our dollars must stay in Denver. But certainly the partnership and the collaboration is very much part of our day-to-day work. Great question.
A question for our data team, Lynn, Kate, and Catherine. I'm curious, is any of the data that you collected was either surprising to you or confirmed some thoughts that you may have already had prior to analyzing what we received.
I'll jump in from the first phase. It was confirming in the interviews that we had, it was deeply confirming of the resiliency of the cultural sector and how much it was the cultural sector that was going to lead us out of the pandemic. They were the ones that were finding both the hope in the moment and just the creative skills of how do we come together as a community? How do we keep connected? How do we find ways to keep expressing ourselves in this time? And lo and behold, as the pandemic ebbed, the tracks that we saw creatives laying at the beginning was exactly what we saw coming out at the end. And so it was, I didn't expect to not see that, but it was deeply affirming to see, oh yes, here it is.
I'll just say kind of similar to Lynn, like a lot of the findings, just from a data perspective, it's very comforting, as I said earlier, when your data look like what you expect it to look, given what you've heard from other pieces of data. So obviously, seeing what the changes were over time. I will say that, we know that neighborhoods are really important, but it's so interesting to me in the survey how much your personal neighborhood kind of shapes your sense of what Denver is like broadly, because I think they're linked. I will say I haven't done, and this isn't designed to do the specific type of test to look at that, but that the drop in the sense of whether Denver is an arts town seems to correspond to people's ratings of arts and culture in their own neighborhood. And so I think that was one of the, now that I know it, well, duh, I guess I should have known that before. But I do think it's really interesting and just reinforces how important neighborhoods are.
Brooke, and I have a question, by the way. If it's okay, if I jump in to ask a question of our data experts, looking back, and this is a question especially for Lynn, given the fact that grounded theory, right, is a qualitative research method used to develop theories directly from the data, as you said, instead of the other way around, right, is designed to inductively generate theory rather than test existing hypotheses, right? There is, as you and I talked a lot at the beginning, there is risk in using that, like sharing that and making that, again, a plan. In your opinion, right, as an expert that has worked with other cities, with other entities in data, and I remember you saying, I've never done this way before. Looking back, what do you think? Like, do you see that as a strength of perhaps it's a different way of looking at cultural planning for other cities? Would you do it again? Right. Again, it was in a moment very specific to a response to the where we were at the time. But looking at at cultural planning in general and in our role, and as we look forward to support the sector more fully, what is your opinion in terms of that way of cultural planning?
Yeah. So I'm a large proponent of traditional means of planning because eventually the information has to go in front of electeds. And that's a very hyper-rational environment. That's one where you need those really thick appendices that has all the information and everything that everyone has said. They as elected officials need to know that this actually represents the people that they're representing. That said, the health, the longevity of a cultural sector in particular is built on relationships and trust. And that only happens in conversation. And that's built one conversation at a time. So if I had a magic wand, I would do it all the same again. Is that possible in every city? Maybe, maybe not. It's a big commitment, but that's, I think, what sets Denver apart is the willingness, not just in that moment, but to continually recognize that cultural communities are deeply communities and that those grow through one conversation at a time. So yes, I would do it again if the opportunity ever arose.
Thank you. It's just why we are constantly learning, and it's good to start thinking ahead of what is the best approach to where we go next. So thank you, Lynn. Back to you, Brooke.
Thank you. I am curious, Ariana, and perhaps anyone else, how would you recommend people attending this session use this data as a creative or as a cultural organization in their work? Do you have any advice in addition to what Alejandra has shared in terms of, thanks, I've attended, now what? What do I do with this other than, great, this is really interesting. How do we apply it?
Well, I believe that and I'll focus first on organizations. They are the ones in the ground, right? They are the ones that are directly connecting with residents. They are the ones that are engaging residents, supporting, serving residents. And I think knowing what the priorities are for residents, right? What the priorities are for residents, but also their needs, right? The gaps. I would hope that knowing that will then be a tool that they use to when they have to sit down and make programming decisions that and need to prioritize, right? A budget is a statement of values, and we don't have all the dollars to do everything we want to, but that when there is the time to make those decisions, that they can look at that data and say, well, we heard that people want more access to activities in neighborhoods. Actually, then that can impact how they look at their programming and the spaces that they serve. When they see that a majority of residents believe that arts and culture play a key role on mental health, that improves mental health, I hope that then that inspires that cross discipline, that cross sector collaboration, right? And that's beyond just arts organizations, but non-arts organizations or service organizations, right, that are thinking about how do we support mental health. And I hope that it also from that perspective, right, that then they look at who could be an arts partner, and an arts partner could also look at how can we then support maybe other service organizations and partner to support mental health. And those are just two examples. But as you know, Brooke, I'm a big proponent of every year we should engage in an exercise of looking at every budget line item, right, on how we spend our dollars and ask ourselves, why are we doing this? Is this actually supporting something that we know communities want and need, right? That we are not duplicating, but actually complementing other culture organizations. And that is the question about, does it support Denver Creates, i.e., does it support the data? So that's how I see it as a tool. And lastly, I think if organizations are going to their board of trustees, for example, I can see, platforms saying, this is a program that is effective not only because of the data we gathered, within our programs, but this is something that is needed. And this is the data that supports that with Denver Creates, right? That it is also used to bring validity to the work of arts culture organizations, because it can be the board, but it can also be a funder, right? That could be also a way to present a strong funding ask based on data.
Thank you. And it related to that, one of the last questions in our chat is, after this, what are next steps? How do we turn this data and the conversation that we're having into action?
So I'll start, and and maybe our data experts also have experience in terms of how data translates into an actual action. But I'll start by the fact of Alejandra, and Platform are a great example of how it turns into action. What I would say is what you have in Denver Creates, again, is the data. It is actually the hopes, needs, aspirations, then the challenges of our sector and our residents is there. What comes next is us as arts and venues, we are a steward of the plan. So it's going to take all of us. So we ourselves have key goals connected to Denver Creates. For us, it means sharing what those goals are. We shared some of that during our lunch, but we will be engaging with the sector and with residents further in 2026, where we will share what our goals are connected to Denver Creates. As an example, we know the need for space. We actually are hosting the new CAST Colorado office, which is Community Art Stabilization Fund Trust, which is they focus on actually finding ways to either for accessible space, identifying, finding funding models that can support artists and creatives and organizations to have access to space, from low rent to actually a path to ownership. So as an example, that's one of the goals that we have as a city, is to support that work. So what comes next is for us as an agency to continue sharing this information, to share what our actionable strategies are for us, what our goals are in support of the sector. The Denver Creates Fund is actually a fund program that we launched this year as part of the Denver Creates Launch that will continue in 2026 to actually support arts and culture in our city. And then we have a few more things that we'll be sharing in 2026. One of them is we are bringing what we call impact teams, which is we'll bring creatives, cultural leaders, and representatives around the table to look at what does access look like? What are the gaps? How can we collectively respond to it and track how we can best support that? So that's what comes next. It's continuing sharing the information, sharing what we're doing, and then supporting what the collective is doing through not only funding, but through resources, as we have shown today, right? Bringing experts to share their expertise with the sector.
Data
there you go.
Experts on what might be next steps for action?
I think Tariana already spoke a little bit to this, but in our work, especially as many people on this call know, if you're a smaller nonprofit, like, research is expensive. And so the fact that this research is shared with you to be used, to talk to board members, to talk to funders, to make the case for the work that you're doing. I think that's kind of my main plug for the data. I will say the beauty of a plan is that it's trying to get everyone to row in the same direction. And so I think, as Arts and Venues is kind of sharing this with philanthropic partners, that kind of these three commitments are the direction we all want to go, thinking about how your own work speaks to those three commitments, recognizing that that's what we heard from the sector and from residents, and that's what this plan kind of lays out as the best way to fully support the work moving forward. Lynn probably has additional thoughts just based on all of her cultural planning as well.
I think that's a beautiful response. It's saying that working in the cultural sector is layered. There's the work of the organization, in the community, in the city, in the region, and the plan helps make those paths that people can follow and reference and talk to. And I think so in many ways the plan is there for the city to know what to do, but the data is there for the organizations to figure out what metrics are they using, how can they create metrics that are going to speak to this next ring of action, so that it ties together. You can speak in a louder voice and can bring attention to the issues that everyone cares so passionately about.
And on behalf of Denver Arts and Venues, we are committed to continuing this gathering of data, both quantitative and qualitative. I think we've seen the power of data, especially when we're looking back, right? And we've seen this progression. We see where we've moved the needle or not, right? So it really becomes very much part of how we do the work, what is really driven and committed to that data. And that's something we will continue to do. And then the other piece is we, as an arts and culture agency and as the arts and culture agency for Denver, we commit to bringing people together, right? To bring a platform to elevate artists and creatives and cultural organizations, and to partner. We believe in partnership and collaboration, and that's not just with the cultural sector, but with those leadership organizations at a state level, at a regional level, at a national level. And we are committed to taking the Denver story to all of those spaces, right? In the spaces that we are at a national level, when we have conversations with the National Endowment for the Arts, we make a case for Denver, right? Which is why we've received at times funding from the NEA to support Denver communities. So that is our commitment to all of you, that we will continue to, the work that we do is really in service of and on behalf of Denver residents and Denver's arts and culture sector.
Thank you, all of you. And in the spirit of data, and in the words of what I'm assuming is now a classic movie, Jerry Maguire, help us help you. We are putting up on the screen our post-event survey. We would love for you to take a moment and share feedback on the usefulness and helpfulness of this event, some additional thoughts on where we might go next. This is also in the chat. There's a direct link in the chat if you prefer to do that instead of a QR code. We have recorded this event, and we will be posting this on our website, as well as the PowerPoint slides in the coming days, so you will have access to refer back to this. There was a question in the chat about whether we can download the transcript. We'll be working on that on the back end as well, in the hope that we can make that transcript available to people too. Thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate your time and interest in this topic. And if you have additional questions or feedback, we will drop a link to the email, which is denvercreates@denvergov.org. You can email us there with additional information that you would like from us or feedback from today's event. Thank you so much for being here, and we look forward to connecting with you soon.
Thank you. Until next time.